This is the Books Podcast presented by Tim Haig.
Beauty often blinds us to other qualities. When you're looking for conflicts, you often find them within families, and brothers just seem like a perfect setting for that.
I ask you, gentlemen of the jury, is this the kind of book you'd like your wives and servants to read?
We have talked to Larry Watson a couple of times before. He is one of my favourite novelists, so to be honest, I'm going to go a bit fanboy. Larry, thanks for joining us on the Books Podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the kind words.
The new novel is called The Lives of Edie Pritchard, and I'm going to put my cards on the table and tell you I thought it was absolutely beautiful. I loved it to bits. So I'm just going to ask you to tell me about it. Let's start off with where we are. Where is the novel set?
The novel is set in Gladstone, Montana. It's sort of east central Montana. It's not the part of Montana that ever makes it onto the pretty picture calendars or the postcards. The novel has three sections, and there's a bit of Gladstone, Montana in all three sections. It's also the town that I set a previous novel, As Good as Gone, in.
That's right. And this is very much Larry Watson territory, isn't it? I mean, Montana is next door to your home state of North Dakota. And although it's quite a long way from where you currently live, it's all, as far as we're concerned, it's all in the same vicinity. It's the Midwest of America.
That's right. It reminds me of that New Yorker diagram or something that showed a vast New York and Manhattan, and then the rest of the country just sort of squeezed together. But we're all out there. Yeah.
Okay, we said it's in three parts. This novel, it covers pretty much. Well, you call it the lives of Edie Pritchard. So it's this woman Edie, who, by the way, is a wonderful creation. And we find her as a young married woman, then later on, and then as a grandmother at the end. We have to start with her because she's the centre of the book. Tell me about Edie. What sort of a woman is this?
Well, for one thing, she is at the center of the novel, and that was a bit of a surprise for me. My working title for this was Edie and the Linderman twins. In that very first section, she's married to Dean Linderman, and I thought those three characters might share center stage. But as I wrote, Edie just came to the fore. You didn't mention that she's beautiful, but she is.
We were going to.
But she has many qualities besides her beauty.
It's not just that she's beautiful, is it? It's that she's got a special quality. She's got a sort of female star quality. There are other pretty girls. Roy Linderman, one of the brothers, the one she's not married to, in an early scene, recollects a time when they were at high school. He saw Edie and another girl. She's lovely. But Edie was the one, and just looking at his back, he could see that she was special. She was different. She was somehow beyond Gladstone, the town that they grew up in.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Of course, Roy has an especially discerning eye, and he's especially observant when it comes to Edie. But apart from her beauty, she's smart. She's brave. She's strong. She's loyal. But as we all know, beauty often blinds us to those other qualities, and those qualities are every bit as rare as beauty. And that's part of the difficulty in Edie's life. Other people keep defining her, and she struggles with that.
She also can be a minx. There's a welcome home party. We'll come back to it because it's a central part of the plot. But she casually drops him in it and says something that Roy didn't want the family to know about. And there's a man who is attracted to her much later in life. When she's working as a dental nurse, and this man keeps coming to get his teeth cleaned, and she's quite brutal with him in shutting him down. And there's a scene when Dean and Roy have had a fight over her, and Roy falls asleep in one room. In the next room, she tries to get Dean to fuck her, which is quite minxy.
It is, and she's perplexed, of course, and she comments on this in the very first section of the book when she's in the car with Roy. They've been talking about childhood diseases, which Dean always got and Roy didn't, and Edie wonders if desire is something like a childhood disease that one brother gets and it passes the other by, because Dean seems to have lost his desire for Edie and seems to be withdrawing, and she can't figure out why, but she tries very, very hard to get his attention.
Brothers is a major theme of this book, and you've got a lovely little shorthand for brothers. Early on, Aunt Nora, who is the mum's brother, says, "Don't get into a car with Uncle Earl." That's the only thing we ever hear about Uncle Earl. But then people also know, there are women whose husbands would never let them get into a car with Roy Linderman, but not Dean. No, brothers, and later on, there's a pair of brothers who are travelling with Edie's granddaughter, who have a similarly toxic dynamic in a way. So, what is the fascination of the brother dynamic for you? What does it mean?
Well, I confess I'm not exactly sure, and I don't have brothers myself. When I was growing up, it always seemed to me that kids who had older brothers had some sort of an advantage, that they had a brother who was going to go ahead and educate them about sports and women and the ways of the world. Well, I write about places with relatively small populations, so when you're looking for conflicts, you often find them within families, and brothers just seem like a perfect setting for that. I should also say that the twins in this novel are also a fascination of mine. Our family is just rife with twins. My mother was a twin. My great-grandfather was a twin. Aunt and uncle twins. And so I've often put twins in my novel as to pay a kind of homage to family. But with this novel, I thought perhaps I'd do a little bit more exploration, and the twin brothers seemed perfect for that.
Edie wonders whether she chose the right twin, because Roy and Dean are non-identical twins, but they're twins. And Edie knows that she could have chosen Roy, and Roy would have been happy for that. Why didn't she? Why did she choose Dean?
She has a discerning eye. I think she knows that if you are in a relationship with Roy, he is not likely to be faithful. And in one of the very first meetings between Edie and Dean, he sort of comes to her rescue when a different boyfriend has abandoned her. And I think she sees in him somebody who might be there for her when she needs him. She loves him. She recognizes him as the introvert that he is. But sure, she's curious. And whether twins are identical or not, there can often be a confusion. I mean, I think back to the twins that I went to school with, and even though Norton and Perry weren't identical, I was never quite sure which one was which. And we see that in Gladstone, in that small town, that someone might say to Edie, "Oh, is it Roy you're married to?" No, it's Dean.
At the very beginning of the book, she has got into a car with Roy Linderman, which is something most people know better to. And of course, they're taking a trip for a good reason. In fact, one of the things I loved about the book is that every time she gets into a car with Roy, there is a good reason for it, even though it's not necessarily a good idea. And I loved that he was going on a mission. He's going to go and buy a truck, is Roy, and he's paying Edie $40 for her help. It would have been Dean, but he's not well, and Dean would have done it for nothing. But it's lovely that Roy is buying her, his sister-in-law, even on this small scale.
That's right. And they're leaving Gladstone. And there are a number of times throughout the novel when Roy is making his pitch to Edie, and he wants to have a relationship with her, and he often proposes it in terms of, we'll go away, we'll just leave town, it doesn't matter in which direction. And he makes that proposal throughout his life and throughout Edie's.
Almost his motivation for getting into her car is so that he can say to her, let's just keep going.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And those car trips are important in all three sections, and certainly the car trips with Roy, but also a trip in the second section that Edie takes with her daughter.
Men and women in this book they fall very much into two camps. I mean, I must say, you write women so beautifully. I wonder, do you ever worry about, like, what would they call it, gender appropriation? Do you ever wonder that people will say, what's Larry doing writing women? Surely, what could he possibly know about being a woman? Does that ever cross your mind?
It crosses my mind. And remember, the book was only, publication date was only a couple days ago, so this could still happen. Sure, I'm ready for it.
How will you respond?
Well, I will say that though I think that men and women are different in significant ways, I will say that I think we are more alike than we are different, that we share those human desires, fears, attitudes. Well, maybe not attitudes, but I in the discussion of the differences between men and women in recent years, I sometimes fear that what we share has been lost.
I have to say that as well as Edie, there are lots of other wonderful films. I loved Dean and Roy's mother. She was brilliantly and very deftly created, because she doesn't have a lot of screen time, as it were. But she is so clear and so vivid. It seems to me you got it right.
Thank you. Yeah, I liked her a lot too. I mean, I want to say I like her because she's not my mother. None of us wants her for a mother. One of those characters that we might like to read about or hear about, but not have a relationship with.
And in contrast, men in Edie's world, on the whole, can't be trusted. To some extent, some of them can, but is it just the effect Edie has on them, or is it all the men in these towns, in these big, wide open spaces of Midwest America?
I think there's. Certainly Edie has an effect on men, but I think her effect perhaps is to bring out this something in men, and I think that part of that something is to try to impose an identity on Edie. They want Edie to be someone for them rather than to try to see who Edie is for herself. And I think that's sort of a male thing, I'm sorry to say. I think it's gotten better over the years, but I think it's still around.
She does say at one point, every time I run into somebody who knew me, I feel like a part of me vanishes, because she knows that what they're seeing is not what she feels that she is. It's one of the reasons that she moves away. And then she finds herself back in Gladstone as a grandmother, and feels that it didn't work. And of course, moving away is very much a a Larry Watson theme, and it's very much a theme of this book. You can't, in the end, get away, can you?
Well, no, that old saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
And in Gladstone, Edie is there, and sometimes people remember her. Of course, she's a memorable person, but they don't always remember her accurately. And finally, by the third section, she's given up. She knows that people remember her in ways that are inaccurate, but there's not much she can do about it, or there's not much she's willing to do any longer.
One of the things that Edie brings out in men is violence. Now, there is a little bit of violence. It's not a Clint Eastwood film, this book. But there is an enormous amount of latent violence. Sometimes push comes to shove. But there are guns all the way through the book. I think I'm right in saying that they're never fired. But, of course, the whole point about a gun is that it can be fired. And there's this latent violence is always there in a way that is slightly shocking. Are you especially conscious of that?
Yeah. Yes, I am. Yeah. And you're right. The novel is a violation of the Chekhov law that said if there's a gun in the mantle in the first act, it has to go off by the end. But no, the guns are around. I think it was true of that part of the world when I was younger. I'm guessing that it's still true, and probably there are even larger arsenals today. And whether they are fired or not, their presence means something.
What in the book, what in the novel is the purpose of the latent violence?
That any conflict can escalate and become deadly. So it's sort of a way to raise the stakes, to know that any conflict can go beyond harsh words or even a fist fight.
That's right. And at one point, Roy has a gun, which gets lost, and at one point, Dean has a gun. The feral brothers who turn up with Edie's granddaughter have a gun, and these they seem to be pervasive. But of course, it doesn't matter that you violate Chekhov's principle, because this is a sort of quantum gun, isn't it? It's an uncollapsed wave function. It can always happen. It can always be fired. So it's always there.
That's right, and they are near at hand too. I mean, it's not something that someone has to seek out, and it's almost as if these guns are always within arm's reach.
Can I ask you quickly about a word about your philosophy of writing? One of the absolute delights of the lives of Edie Pritchard is its construction. It is put together like a Swiss watch, and that I always think that's quite an old-fashioned virtue. It's a thing that novelists used to do. It used to be something that they took pride in, and I'm not sure it's as true now, but I think it might be to you. What is your attitude to that kind of thing?
Well, I thank you. First of all, I do believe that that literary works should be well constructed. I try to pay attention to sentences and paragraphs in putting the thing together as well. I also believe in story, and stories I think have fallen into disfavor a bit in literary circles today.
Is it just me, or is this novel getting quite a lot of attention?
Yeah, I hope it does. Now, it's possible that the fact that there's a movie coming out, and anytime there's a possibility that your name in a movie is mentioned in the same sentence,
Let's talk about that for a moment. Yes, we spoke a couple of years ago, or several years ago, about your novel Let Him Go, which I loved to bits, of course I did, and which is now coming out as a movie. Is it next month?
It was scheduled to be next month, and it has now been moved back to November 6th, and we'll see what happens. People aren't, I think they see that people are not yet ready to go to movie theaters.
Ours aren't open yet. Ours are opening at the end of this month, if we're lucky. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, you want it to hit the movie theaters when people are going. You've got to tell me, who is in the movie? Who are the stars?
The stars are Kevin Costner, Diane Lane, and British actress Leslie Manville.
Who is wonderful, by the way. Have you actually seen the film yet?
Yes, we have.
Lucky you.
Yep, we watched it, and we thought it was terrific. We just, yeah.
And are you now best buddies with Kevin Costner?
No, I'm not best buddies, but I shook his hand.
Okay. I hope he shook yours, since you provided him with the part. And last time, we talked about turning it into a film, I think, or... I seem to remember suggesting that Henry Fonda could have played it in times past, and Kevin Costner is almost the Henry Fonda of our day, isn't he? He's just right.
We might have talked about it. I had a conversation with the director is also the screenwriter, Tom Bazooka, and I had conversations early on, and he's just done a wonderful job with the script and with the film. My wife and I visited the set and were put in a screen and put in a scene. And if you look very quickly over Kevin Costner's shoulder in the fancy restaurant, you'll see us there pretending to eat.
Ah, you Hitchcock, you. That's brilliant. Well, I'm really looking forward to the film, and that's Let Him Go. I suppose that means that it'll sell a scad of copies with a movie tie-in. And yes, let's hope that your name is that much more recognised, and Edie Pritchard also becomes that kind of success.
That'd be wonderful. We need an actress who can age from 24 to 64.
Oh, they can do that these days. Don't worry about that. Larry, thank you very much. The Lives of Edie Pritchard by Larry Watson is published by Algonquin Books. It's £21.99 in the UK and $27.95 in the United States. And I urgently recommend it. Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
That was Books Podcast, presented by Tim Haig. Books Podcast is a Green Shoot production. You can find out more at www.green-shoot.com, and Tim can be contacted on tim@green-shoot.com.